All right, Z, can you hear me? Mic check, mic check. Mic check, mic check. One, two, three.
Oh no. I just jammed to do white balance and make sure it was good on my end. Yeah.
Okay, we're good to go. Yep.
My slogan was our trust in our unity. He said our diversity is in our unity. Sir.
Who said that?
Sir.
Who said that? Oh, that's your phone.
Sir.
Hi, we're about to get started.
Diversity is in our unity. What? The video is like.
Wait, I can actually get a picture of me smiling. Ready? Because I'm usually like this. Rikers is in crisis. It's annoying. It's annoying. Gail doesn't know. No one runs against me.
That's right. Gail's not gonna have no voice. She said not nobody.
Nobody. It's weird. Nobody. They can't.
She said they can't touch me. You don't know she's the queen of the Upper West Side. She's the queen of the Upper West Side.
Manhattan, honey.
You right. Oh, she said Manhattan. Excuse me.
How are you? Thank you for your nice note. That was very
Oh,
nice.
thank you. Beautiful day.
That was a nice day.
It's a nice day.
Yay, Jan.
Yay, right?
So Sandy's not coming because she's still feeling a little under the weather. So just wanted to let you know we just found out. So.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to acknowledge the passing of Dr. Hazel Dukes, former president of the NAACP New York State Conference. As one of her daughters, I can tell you that Dr. Dukes was a pillar of our community and devoted her life to public service. She was a true civil rights leader, and we continue to build on her work today. I was very honored to celebrate her life and legacy this morning. Now, I'd like to address the Trump administration's decision to cut $1.1 billion in funding for food banks and free school lunches, as well as his plans to dismantle the Federal Department of Education, starting with yesterday's firing of half of its employees. Families across this city and country rely on our nation's schools for their children's development. The key to a healthy and safe society is an accessible and strong education system. The severe implications of the Trump administration's plan are disastrous for working families, just like the many chaotic actions being advanced by him. While the Federal Education Department provides less than 10% of the nation's public school funding, its major role is supporting students from working-class families, including students with disabilities. New York City schools, like those across the country, are largely funded by city and state taxes. But federal funds support critical programming for low-income students with disabilities and financial aid for working-class students to attend college. These programs are essential to the education of Americans and New Yorkers and are an attack on the country's working-class families. None of this helps our students, teachers, school staff, or the working families counting on our federal government to do its job to ensure that every child can succeed. The gutting of our federal education department, the chaos that economic forecasters say is pushing us towards a recession, and the gross violations of civil rights and the United States Constitution are not making life easier for the working people in our city and our country. This orchestrated fear and chaotic uncertainty is tanking the health of our country and our economy. It seems to be authoritarian rule for the sake of demonstrating power, but not to help any hardworking American. We cannot allow ourselves to be desensitized. Each dangerous action brings us closer to tyranny, weakens the country, and hurts our city and New Yorkers. We must speak clearly about the impact on the people who rely on our leadership and unite to defend our democracy and each other. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but this council is committed to fighting for New Yorkers and their needs. Before I continue, though, I do want to take a moment to recognize and welcome students from Columbia Journalism School and their professor, Juan Manuel Benitez, who have joined us today. Welcome back to the Red Room at City Hall, everybody. Good to see you all. Now we'll move on to our stated agenda. First, we'll vote on the following land use items. H&H operating agreement will amend the New York City Health and Hospitals operating agreement to clarify H&H ownership of 9 properties. The properties are located in the districts of Deputy Speaker Ayala and Council members Marte, Abreu, Dinowitz, Stevens, Hudson, Osei, and Banks. Queens Future map change and amendment. This is the first of several expected private applications for land use approvals needed in order for sites to be eligible to participate in the state-led process to award up to 3 gaming facility licenses downstate, including in the city. The application is seeking to redevelop the parking lots of Citi Field into a casino complex that would include a food hall, music hall, hotel, convention space, parking, and 20 acres of new public park space in Councilmember Moya's district. 1093-1095 Jerome Avenue, UDAP, will facilitate the development of a new 11-story residential building with approximately 59 affordable units in Councilmember Stevens' district. 2201 Davidson Avenue will facilitate the long-delayed rehabilitation of one building with 48 affordable residential units under HPD's third-party transfer program in Councilmember Sanchez's district. The council will also disapprove Ledive's application for a revocable consent to operate a sidewalk cafe in Councilmember Marte's district. Next, we'll vote on the following finance items. Resolution 791, sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan, to approve the new designation and changes in the designation of certain organizations to receive funding in the expense budget. Today, we'll also vote on the following pieces of legislation. Resolution 740, sponsored by Councilmember Lincoln Ressler, would call on the state legislature to pass and the governor to sign S.590 and A.3665, which would protect ballot access for charter revision proposals from being blocked by mayoral enacted charter revision commissions and increase transparency requirements for commissions. Resolution 57A, sponsored by Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, calls on New York State to create a program to provide food benefits for those not eligible for existing benefits, including anyone over 55 meeting existing income eligibility requirements. Resolution 41A, sponsored by Councilmember Alexa Aviles, which calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign S.2082 and A.3474 to create the New York State Working Families Tax Credit. Resolution 717, sponsored by Councilmember Crystal Hudson, which calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign A-270 and S-141, also known as the Access to Representation Act, which would establish the right to legal counsel in immigration court proceedings and establishes consistent funding streams for immigration legal services for New Yorkers. Resolution 714A, sponsored by Councilmember Shahana Hanif, calls on the New York State Legislature to reintroduce and pass and the governor to sign A-3506, S-2235, also known as the New York for All Act, which would regulate the discovery and disclosure of immigration status by New York State and local government entities. Introduction 564A, sponsored by Councilmember Gail Brewer, would amend the New York City Charter and Administrative Code to require that Department of Records and Information Services, or DORIS, maintain a publicly accessible and searchable online database with every post that any official government account has shared on a social media platform. All agencies and offices of elected officials would be required to provide DORIS with information about any official social media accounts that are associated with the agency or elected official in a form designated by DORIS. I invite Councilmember Brewer to the podium to discuss her legislation.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I want to say that social media posts are official government records. Intro 564 requires DORIS to maintain a publicly accessible and searchable database, as you heard, of the media posts and websites of government officials, and requires agencies and officials to provide DORIS with a list of each social media account in use. Some social media accounts, such as NYPD Chief of Department on Twitter, are carried over from one administration to the next, but others are unique to the individual, like at NYPD Dardy on Twitter, which was recently deleted. All need to be captured and put in the archive forever. Because of my history of supporting municipal archives, I feel strongly that such records are now part of our history and must be saved for future generations. As council member previously, students, I've been here forever, and chair of government operations, I took on Mayor Bloomberg's administration when they wanted to merge Doris and DCAS. That's the agency that deals with buildings. No way. I enlisted the help of every archivist in New York State, and we made sure no such merger took place. When de Blasio mayor took over, he undid the merger deal, which was then on the desk of the Corporation Council. The rest is history. And we have an excellent commissioner now of Doris, Pauline Toole, and she understands the importance of permanent government records. It's foremost in her agency's mission. The way it works is software can scrub for the social media accounts that are listed as official, but there are other ones that are official, but they aren't listed. And that's what this bill would do, would make sure that they are also included in archival material. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's good stuff, Gail. Thank you.
I love saving Doris. That was great.
Introduction 977A, sponsored by Councilmember Althea Stevens, would increase the frequency of Department of Probation reports on programs offered to probationers, compliance with departmental mandates, and recidivism rates. In addition, the reports would require information on the nature of technical probation violations and clarify that DOP is to provide information on all programs it administers. I invite Councilmember Stevens to the podium to discuss her legislation today.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Speaker Adrienne Adams and my colleagues, for your continued commitment to addressing the challenges our community faces, including those who are often overlooked. Today, we are passing Intro Bill 977A, which will require the Department of Probation to provide a detailed report on technical probation violations and all programs offered by the department. This legislation increases the frequency of reporting of probation programs, compliance and departmental mandates, and regulatory rates. It also requires more transparency around the nature of technical probation violations and ensuring that DOP provides information of all programs administered. Probation is meant to be a second chance, an opportunity for individuals to rebuild their lives outside of incarceration. This legislation will help identify gaps in service and address racial and economic disparities in probation enforcement and ensuring that probation serves its true purpose, which is rehabilitation and not punishment. When we talk about public safety, we must recognize that safety is more than just policing. It's about creating pathways to success and not roadblocks to opportunities. We must ensure that programs meant to support our communities are actually working, not just existing. That's why I'm continuing to push for greater transparency in our justice system and ensuring that our city resources are used to drive real progress, not just keep our communities segregated. With this bill, we take a meaningful step towards making sure probation is a tool for opportunity and moving forward and allowing new chances for all those who had an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Introduction 1036A, sponsored by Councilmember Sandy Nurse, would require the Department of Correction to issue quarterly public reports on people in custody who have been ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation to determine if they are competent to stand trial. Reports would include information on the type of housing area where these individuals are being detained and the average length of time spent in custody. Councilmember Nurse could not be with us today, but we thank her for her legislation. Introduction 420A, sponsored by Councilmember Carlina Rivera, would require DOC to establish a child visitor program to improve the experience of children visiting department facilities and report annually on the status of the program. All new city jails would also be required to have a specifically designed visiting area for child visitors. I invite Councilmember Rivera to the podium to discuss her legislation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leadership on our criminal legal system and the reforms that we desperately need in order to make Rikers Island and our justice facilities safer for those that are visiting and those that work there. Again, I want to thank everyone for this opportunity to deliver remarks. This is Intro 420, my bill that we are voting on today. It's going to require the Department of Corrections to develop a program to improve the experience of children visiting their loved ones in city correctional facilities. I want to thank advocates for assisting us with this bill, specifically Osborne Association for their support. 1 in 14 children have an incarcerated parent. and visiting a loved one in jail should not be a traumatic or dehumanizing experience, especially for children. But I've heard from families and advocacy organizations about how unpleasant or even intimidating it is and it can be to take a child to visit a loved one. The Jail Action Coalition issued a report called Makes Me Want to Cry, which detailed how parents are seeking to protect their children, and unfortunately for incarcerated parents, that often means foregoing that visit in the interest of a child. Imagine a visit that should feel somewhat joyful, leaving you absolutely defeated. Maintaining family bonds is critical to the well-being of individuals who are incarcerated and their families. Yet for too long, the visiting process in our city jails has been rife with issues. This legislation will create a more humane and supportive environment for children visiting their parents and loved ones, ensuring they are met with compassion, not fear. These reforms are a critical step in breaking cycles of harm and prioritizing dignity and care within our correctional system. This bill would require all staff who interact with child visitors to receive specialized training. All new or substantially remodeled city jails shall have a specifically designed visiting area for child visitors. That all children visiting areas provide toys and games and books and arts and crafts materials. And that the department shall conduct a study on the feasibility of implementing televisits on weekend days without reducing the number of hours for in-person visits on weekend days. And that the department produce a report on the program for child visitors, including information on the number of visits by child visitors, the number of staff who receive the training, the average length of time between the time a child visitor arrives at a city jail and the time such child visitor commences a visit, and of course, more than that. Having an incarcerated parent is already a traumatic experience for children, and research shows that children with incarcerated parents are at a higher risk for developing anxiety, depression, behavioral issues, and performing poorly in school. Children with incarcerated parents already face enough challenges. The least we can do is ensure their visits are dignified, safe, and meaningful. I'm grateful to my colleagues for their legislation that also aims to support the tens of thousands of children in our city experiencing the criminal legal system in this way. And I look forward to passing this bill and continuing to work to address the public failures that exist within the very places intended to rehabilitate. Thank you.
Thank you. Introduction 1023A, sponsored by Councilmember Jennifer Gutierrez, would require DOC to create and operate an online scheduling system to facilitate visits to incarcerated individuals. At minimum, the system would give the public the ability to select, reserve, and modify dates for jail visits and provide real-time updates when DOC must cancel a scheduled visit. I invite Councilmember Gutierrez to the podium to discuss her legislation.
Thank you, Speaker. For too long, visiting a loved one in jail has been a dehumanizing bureaucratic nightmare, one that punishes not just the incarcerated, but their families, their children, and our communities. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a failure of our system, one that makes re-entry harder and recidivism more likely. What makes this council different is our diversity, our lived experiences. Many of us, myself included, have made the difficult journey to Rikers. We know firsthand the toll it takes, and that's why when we pass laws like this one, we do so with purpose and urgency. The Family Connect Act changes the status quo. It ensures visitation is accessible, transparent, and dignified, what it always should have been. By creating an online system to schedule in-person visits, we remove barriers that have kept families apart for too long. It also includes a communication mechanism and a report to ensure that this system can't be used to reduce visits or unilaterally deny visits, and will give both individuals and the public a detailed understanding of why visits might be denied. This is about more than efficiency. It's about justice and humanity. 87% of people at Rikers are in pre-trial detention. 50% have a mental health diagnosis. And in New York City, only 30% of deposed trials result in a guilty outcome. Yet families are forced to endure punishment alongside their loved ones for crimes that most have not even been convicted of. With this bill and the ones from my colleagues today, we are saying family bonds matter, dignity matters, and every person in our city deserves a system that treats them with respect. I want to thank Madam Speaker and her team for continuing to deliver for families here in New York. And of course, I want to thank Committee Chair Nurse for her leadership and support of this bill, as well to all my colleagues, and congrats. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Introduction 1026A, sponsored by Councilmember Crystal Hudson, would require DOT to report separately on in-person and televisits and provide more detailed reporting on the reasons jail visits are not completed. The bill would also require DOC to record interactions in which a person in custody is informed without a visitor and refuses to attend the visit, and upon request, provide those video recordings to defense attorneys. Next, we will vote on a package of bills related to improving the experiences of our foster youth. In Introduction 1052A, also sponsored by Councilmember Hudson, would require expansion of the Foster Youth Experience Survey that ACS is required to distribute annually to foster youth. This bill would expand that survey to include questions about experiences relating to gender expression, gender identity, sex characteristics, and sexual orientation, and would allow foster youth to express any additional feedback about their experiences. Finally, this bill would require the survey to include questions relating to a foster youth's relationship with ACS workers instead of asking solely about their foster parents and placement. I now invite Councilmember Hudson to the podium. See, I'm thinking about that the whole time.
I know, it's a distraction.
That's what's doing it. It's distracting me.
I'm gonna pull it out. It doesn't get old. It never gets old.
We're the same height now.
We are. Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak on a couple of my bills that the Council is voting on today. I'm proud to pass Intro 1026 to reform reporting requirements for jail visits. In late 2023, the nonprofit news organization The City released an investigation that revealed the Department of Corrections canceled more than 15,000 video visits since 2020. Incarcerated individuals rely on external social support and connection for their rehabilitation and well-being, and any impediment to receiving visits from family and friends infringes on their civil liberties as they uphold their rights to due process. Intro 1026 would address concerns that correction officers are canceling visits by falsely claiming incarcerated people are rejecting the visits by requiring more detailed record keeping for jail visits. And Intro 1052 aims to strengthen protections for some of our city's most vulnerable populations. 30% of youth in the foster care system identify as LGBTQIA+, compared to the national average of just 11.4%. Many LGBTQIA+ youth who face horrendous cases of homophobia and transphobia end up in our foster care system, and this discrimination continues even in the system for many. Intro 1052 expands ACS's Foster Youth Experience Survey to include questions about the treatment of foster youth by ACS and foster care providers, as well as questions about their experiences with gender expression, gender identity, and sexual orientation. This bill will ensure that our government has the information it needs to give LGBTQIA+ youth across our city the opportunity to feel safe and protected. And two things I just want to add. One, for the students, that I mentioned an investigation by the city, and so often a lot of the legislation that we present to be passed comes from the reporting done by so many of the amazing reporters we have here in New York City. And also, I want to note that only under the leadership of a majority women council do you have a package of legislation like what we're passing today to provide dignity to people who are incarcerated and to LGBTQIA+ communities. Everybody right now is under attack, and it's really important that we continue to support and bolster the leadership that we have here in the City Council, including by our Speaker, Adrienne Adams. Thank you.
You can stay. Thank you very much, Councilmember Hudson. Introduction 56A, sponsored by Councilmember Chiosei, would require ACS to survey and report annually on the number and placements of LGBTQIA+ foster youth, including their racial and specific LGBTQIA+ identities. Councilmember Osei could not join us today, but we thank him for his work on this bill. Introduction 81A, sponsored by Councilmember Kevin Riley, would require an audit and report on foster care placement notices. State law and regulations issued by the Office of Children and Family Services require that attorneys for foster youth receive notice of changes in foster placement 10 days in advance or within one business day of the change if it was anticipated. This bill would require ACS to periodically audit caseworkers to ensure that they provide notifications within an appropriate time frame. Councilmember Riley could not join us today, but we thank him for his work on this legislation. Finally, Introduction 216A, sponsored by Councilmember Shahana Hanif, would require the Department of Social Services to implement various changes to improve the IDNYC application process. The changes would improve access to appointments for IDNYC applicants and ensure that all New Yorkers with proof of identity approved under the program are not being inappropriately denied. I invite Councilmember Hanif to the podium to discuss her legislation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Councilmember Shahana Hanif, and I represent the 39th Council District, which includes Park Slope, Windsor Terrace, Kensington, Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens, Columbia Waterfront, Borum Hill, and Borough Park. Today, the Council will vote on my bill, Intro 216A, the Access to IDNYC Act. Thank you to Deputy Speaker Ayala, Councilmember Brewer, for introducing the bill alongside me, to Immigration Chair Aviles for moving it through the committee, and to Speaker Adams for bringing it to the floor today. And I want to give an extra thank you to Speaker Adams for being one of the very few top leaders that have consistently shown that immigrants are welcomed in our city. So thank you. Since 2015, the IDNYC has provided over 2.3 million municipal ID cards to New Yorkers, regardless of immigration status, housing situation, or past incarceration. IDNYC offers critical access to the city's safety net. However, operational failures have made obtaining an IDNYC unnecessarily difficult. Last summer, after a 500-day wait period, my office held a pop-up IDNYC enrollment event. While proud to host one of the few drives in my district, the event highlighted the urgent need for better program support. For over a year, there have been no same-day appointments, the scheduling site is hard to navigate, and applicants often face arbitrary rejections due to vague guidelines. These issues have made getting an IDNYC unnecessarily difficult, especially when the demand is high. Intro 216A, the Access to IDNYC Act, will address these issues and significantly improve the IDNYC application process. This bill was drafted with input from advocates and direct service providers, including Brooklyn Defender Services, and I'm grateful for their collaboration. The Access to IDNYC Act will reinstate same-day walk-in appointments on a pilot basis, ensure the number of available application slots meet the demand, codify improvements to the online appointment scheduling system, establish a review system for applicants who are denied, and add an issue date to the card so cardholders can demonstrate how long they have resided in New York City. This is especially important for federal immigration proceedings. Additionally, IDNYC remains crucial for gender-diverse New Yorkers. Applicants can select MFX or not designated, in contrast to the Trump State Department's recent federal restrictions on passport gender markers. 10 years ago, former Mayor Bill de Blasio launched this groundbreaking initiative, celebrating how the program filled longstanding gaps in our communities. Today, with the Access to IDNYC Act, we are ensuring that those who need this resource can obtain it without delay. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the Access to IDNYC Act to simplify the process on getting an ID. I also urge support for my Resolution 714A, calling on the state legislature and governor to pass the New York for All Act, which would expand sanctuary city protections statewide. State resources should not be used to enforce federal immigration laws, especially given the Trump administration's family separation agenda. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our stated agenda, and with that, we will take on-topic questions first on the items being voted on today.
Questions on the bills? So many good bills today for our students. Coming back up.
The studies that you would like to be conducted for the childcare and for the custody
Ideally, we're looking to work with them as soon as possible. We've actually been negotiating this bill. It feels like months at this point. So hopefully within the next few months, we'll get a date that it can be implemented and the report will be issued. It typically takes the administration quite some time to issue reports, but we're working closely together.
Go to off topic.
Hi, Ethan.
So yeah, during your state of city last week, the mayor did not show up. And, you know, obviously you're running against him. You call him to resign. Where do things stand with you and him, relationship-wise, at this point? You know, prior to this, there were tensions, but you still had a working relationship. And then just separately, you know, now that you're running, you got into the race kind of late. How are you gonna be able to raise money quickly and, you know, amass support quickly?
Thank you for the question. The mayor and I continue to be cordial. We are about to embark on our 4th budget. I'm excited about it, and I expect that we will once again maintain our cordial relationship while we work towards a great budget for the city of New York. As far as the other question about the campaign, I'm really confident that my campaign is going to be able to raise money, to have the strong operation that helps reach New Yorkers and win the race. There is a desire for steady leadership that works for New Yorkers and doesn't come with the distractions or scandal. I keep saying, you know, no distractions, no scandal, no nonsense. That's going to be our motto. So, and we're building on a diverse coalition. We're really proud of that, of voters who want proven leadership of the city that delivers results for New Yorkers and defends against the threats of this federal administration. Hi, Kelly. Good.
How are you?
Good.
I also wanted to ask you about your campaign. Who are you looking exactly to get support from? What does your coalition look like specifically? And how do you see yourself distancing yourself from that coalition that Mayor Adams might be looking to get in his supposed re-election campaign, and distance yourself from the voters that Cuomo's trying to get? Then I wanted to ask you a question about Tom Homan, who's in Albany today meeting with Republican lawmakers. I wanted to know if you, as a council or you as a speaker, have reached out to him to communicate with him in general about ICE's activity in the city, what's going on with Mahmoud Khalil. I'm just wondering, has there been any lines of communication there?
We have not been in contact with Mr. Homan. We are watching his operations and the way that he is moving throughout the city and state to determine what our conversations will be as a council, what possible legislation we can come through with as a council. So that's where that is. As far as coalition building between other candidates and myself, my candidacy stands alone. I have a clear path and a clear way that I want to get to this win. How other candidates are choosing to move and operate within their own campaigns and operations, I don't know that. I just know that, again, mine is going to be building strong coalition between all of the boroughs, my own in Queens, the Bronx, Manhattan, Staten Island, Brooklyn. We're going to build those coalitions together, and I believe that New Yorkers will have a great coalition with us to make sure that we win this race.
And just a quick follow-up, have you gotten an update on the executive order about ICE returning to Rikers as of today? Do you know what that might look like?
Have not. Waiting on that.
Chris from Politico.
Hi, Chris.
How are you?
Good.
So are you expecting to meet the funding threshold by the Monday deadline?
Well, as far as the Monday deadline is concerned, we are still, we're not going to make any predictions. We have, we're not taking anything for granted either. We've been aggressively fundraising for less than a week. So put that together, you know, as far as what we're doing and how we're working. But we do expect to receive matching funds in time for our campaign to be effective and win this race. Thank you. Hi.
So the first one, ICE arrested Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil. Are you happy with the Adams administration response? And the second question, Cuomo
I think my momentum is very, very good. The enthusiasm around this campaign is indescribable. The electricity around this campaign is fantastic. I think folks were waiting for a breath of fresh air, so I'm really happy about that. I don't know if you were at my launch, but it was amazing. As far as Mr. Khalil, well, let me just say this. I believe that the Trump administration's actions to detain Mr. Khalil, who is a permanent resident with a green card without legal justification, was a new low. Blatantly violating the Constitution was a new low. It's frankly something that everybody in this room should oppose, regardless of whether you agree with someone's views or not. It crosses an entirely other line towards authoritarianism. And who's next to detain without any due process? Any of us here in this room?
Are you happy with the Adams administration response so far?
I did not hear an appropriate answer from the Adams administration. Okay.
Any other off-topic questions?
Hi.
I wanted to ask, in January, Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams announced a $154 million plan to increase policing in subway stations. How do you plan to balance the need for public safety with calls for police reform, and what specific policies would you implement to achieve this balance?
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you for being here. We've already, as a council, I think I can speak for most of my members when I say that our view on public safety tends to be an all-inclusive piece of this pie, not just policing, but we also believe that we need to protect victims of violence, and we have enacted the first trauma recovery centers in the entire state of New York, and that is looking at victims of violence so that we are taking a look at the perpetration of cycles of violence, where that comes from, because we know that cycles of violence perpetuates more violence. So the victims actually have told us this is what they want to see in order to help put an end to cycles of violence out there, which do happen primarily in communities of color. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We expect to do more as time goes on, but we take a look at the entire holistic approach when it comes to public safety, not just one piece or another.
And I have a follow-up, if possible. Given the crowded field of candidates, including former Governor Andrew Cuomo, what strategies will you employ to distinguish your campaign and connect with voters?
My record is a very strong record. I'm going to stand on my record as the leader of this council, which I think is, no, I don't think. It is a record that no other candidate has. I'm the only candidate that has negotiated a budget 3 times for the city of New York, now embarking on our 4th. The only candidate that has actually fought for the rights of our children to maintain their resources, the rights for our public libraries to stay open and expand service, the impactful infrastructure that we need in this city. The only candidate that pretty much has walked up those steps of City Hall for almost a decade and now almost 4 years has been the co-leader of this city. So that is my distinction. It's very, very clear. My qualifications are very, very clear, and I believe that the people, the voters, will see that as well. Thank you for the question.
We'll do one more.
Thank you. So the Trump administration has been pursuing a lot of policies about New York City that are not necessarily popular in New York City, whether it be the case of congestion pricing, opposing congestion pricing, the funds being paid from Columbia University as opposed to immigration with the mayor. So just as a general approach, both now and in your campaign, would you be elected, what should New York City's relationship with the federal government look like? And how would you defend the city against some of these encroachments from the federal government?
Great question. Great question. We have to stay united as New Yorkers. Let me just put it. Whoever becomes the mayor, the target is still going to be in the back of New York regardless. So it's going to be up to us as New Yorkers to defend each other, to defend our city and the values that we hold dear as a city. Again, this council has stood for those values and believing that this is a city of immigrants, number one. Number two, that we have to protect everyone's rights to be here. The Trump administration is going to come after New York and other sanctuary cities as well. We're going to stand on our values. We're going to speak out when we have to. And we're also going to collaborate whenever possible. We can't put up a wall and say we will not deal with this administration. That's not my style anyway. Nor do I think that that would be beneficial to any of the millions of residents of New York. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, Columbia Journalism School is going to put together a mayoral forum April 14th at noon.
Good.
These reporters will be asking the questions.
Yay.
Some of your rivals have already confirmed.
Mhm.
Will you be coming to the forum?
I'm sure I will. Let us check our schedule, and I'm sure I will. If our schedule permits, we'll be there. Love to. Thank you for being here. Yeah. Great to see you all. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues.
Opponent, yeah.